Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Nightmare Road. Of course, you can't see me because I'm in a secret location that no one can know about. I'm in air. I'm in area 55. No, I'm in Studio 51 or 54, Studio 54. Anyways, I am your host Decon here with the very mysterious.
SOS.
And today we have last minute change, but I want to discuss the topic of EVPs.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about EVPs. I actually had a murder case all teed up, but if the co-host isn't into murder tonight, we're going to go paranormal on you. So,
Yeah. Okay, so
EVPs.
EVP. So can you tell me what EVP stands for?
Yeah, it's electronic voice phenomenon, and it what it means is if you hear a voice audibly with your ears when you're somewhere, but there's no one there, right? That's called a disembodied voice. But if you capture an EVP or a voice on a recording device of some sort, we call that electronic voice phenomenon.
Uh, Look at that. See, it's so much technical stuff in the paranormal world. So okay, so are you aware of well, supposedly on the very first EVP ever recorded?
Well, yeah. So was it Edison?
Yes.
I want yes, yes. Go ahead, spill it.
So Edison designed, see, and this is the thing. So Edison designed a device to like record something in like higher frequencies. And there's a couple of stories on here. The one that I'm talking about is higher frequencies, and he didn't know like how to make it fully function. So he's frustrated and he's like, okay, how do I blah blah blah? And he like talking about this, but he's recording. I don't remember what exactly he was trying to record, but then when he was playing it back, there was a voice that basically said something like, I am here to help you, and kind of gave him a tip, right? Is that what it was?
He did capture a voice. I'm not sure it said that, but I
Like
don't remember exactly what it said, but
like he
he
said,
did capture a voice.
yeah, he captured a voice, and I think it was, if I have, unless I'm getting my story mixed up with something else, was like, man, like if only I can have some help, or if somebody can help me. And he said that the voice was the voice that sounded like his father saying, of course I'm here, I'm always here to help you, or something like that. And that was the very first EVP ever captured.
Yep. Yep. I've read that account as well, and it's fascinating because I mean, are you going to argue with Edison? you
Yeah.
know? Um there's some pretty fascinating things, and I can tell you straight up that even on a case where we go, like a house that has no activity, they'll call us in, but that night nothing's going on, we will get EVPs. It's incredibly rare for us to walk away with nothing.
So,
EVPs come in.
and I've seen, okay, so let's say that we're in a place where I tell you, like, I think something's going on. Do you think you communicate with something? Can you walk me kind of like the techniques that you utilize, like in order to try to capture a voice, or you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah. So we honestly, back in the day, I used the cassette recorders. They were the best. They were the best. I don't know what the quality of the EVPs were the best. If you just hit record, when you're trying to record a song before the DJ came on, right? Back in the day. So you hit record on those things, and sometimes we'd forget about it and it'd sit there. So then we're listening back to whatever song we're recording, and then you capture something. So we go to a house, and usually I'm the only person that kind of knows what's going on. I don't tell the rest of the team, but I'll have the team set out recorders, and they're audio recorders that you would use like if you're in the university and you're wanting to record a lecture. It's whatever that you can, you always want to make sure that you use one that you can download to a laptop, because otherwise you can't get it off of there. Um, So we set them all around. And we just, through the course of our investigation, sometimes we'll reset them because if our investigation's 5 hours, 6 hours, we don't want to listen to a 6 hour recording. So we'll go start and stop it again. And
Yeah.
we set them around and we just let them go and see what happens. We were at Gate City Coffee in March, and I'm actually trying to finish up that investigation. There were so many EVPs that and they're overlapping. So it's hard for me to peel them out. But usually we capture the most voice recordings when we're just sitting around talking. But you can get direct responses to questions like Edison did.
Yeah, and that to me is interesting because what you said is you capture EVPs when you guys are just having a conversation. Why do you think that is? Do you think that somebody out there is just lonely and they're like, I have an opinion too?
I think a lot of times, yeah, they're excited to have that conversation. I think it's going all the time and we're not consciously hearing it because it's sometimes they're a mumble and you can't really make out what they're saying, but like I know your voice, right? So if we're in a
Yeah,
building and we're recording, I know your voice. Oh, that's Decon. But then you get a voice that I'm like, wow, that wasn't me and that wasn't him. And there
yeah,
was no one else in there.
and plus my voice
So,
is kind of easy to distinguish because I kind of sound like so my voice kind of drones, kind of like when a person with schizophrenia said that the vacuum cleaner's talking to them. I like to think that I'm what they're listening to. Like the vacuum cleaner's going, and that's my voice. That's like, see, this is what they hear.
whatever. It's
So
really interesting, though. It's really interesting what you get. We'll get animals. Like, I don't know how many times we've had a horse whinny, dogs barking when there were no dogs in the building, no dogs outside. Like, we will go outside and try to investigate. If we're hearing stuff, we walk outside. Like, is this a neighborhood full of barking dogs? No. Okay, that's
yeah, there's no
weird.
dogs here.
You know what I mean? But horse
Yeah,
whinnies, we've had parrots talk. We've had everything that you can imagine on an EVP, and it's bizarre. Lots of children show up on EVPs, like little voices, kids' voices, laughing and giggling. Um, yeah, in a house where there's no kids. So,
here's what's crazy. I think I told you this. So one of my experiences, it could maybe it was an EVP, maybe it wasn't, but I was out on the property, and and I was trying to record a video, and I was like, hey, what's up, guy? Blah blah blah. My stupid whatever the hell I say, and then I was done recording, and I was like, man, I wonder I wonder if that was a good take. So then I'm reviewing it, and all you hear is like, hey, what's up, guy? All of a sudden you hear is that like a gunshot, like a really
oh yeah,
loud,
you did tell me.
like a
Yep.
really loud gunshot, and then I just continue talking, and then I'm like, that is weird. Like there's definitely was not a gunshot when I started recording. Otherwise, I would have dove, But
Yep.
so I wonder what it's like somebody was shot in this spot probably.
Well, exactly. So that's a residual sound that's like probably just looping over and over again. And Ender's Hotel, I think it was the very first video. I can't remember. We've done so many videos there, but I think the very first Ender's Hotel, uh, we heard two very distinct gunshots, and we had the chief of police with us on one investigation and played it for him, and he's like, "Yeah, it's very distinct gunshots," and captured in the Ender's Hotel.
Yeah, because for people that don't know, like gunshots have a very distinct sound. If you know what you're listening to, like people just think that it's just a bang. It's actually not a
Mm-mm.
not a not a bang. What it is you hear a bang and then like a second bang because what it
Yep.
is the explosion of the projectile and then the breaking of the sound barrier. So you hear like a crack with it. It's like a and
Yeah.
that is the see. Now people are like, oh, I didn't know that, or maybe you did, but that's how you know that it's a gunshot. So when I was
It,
listening to that audio, that's what I heard. The first crack, if you know what you're listening to, the first crack, and then immediately half than a millisecond later, you hear the actual like the breaking of the base of the G force, whatever you call it. So that's what and I was like, that is weird. That was not there when I was recording. But I'm sorry, and I'm getting a little bit excited here because I was listening to Art Bell. You remember Art Bell?
oh boy, I loved him. Yeah.
Art Bell here, coast to coast. What I liked about him was the
Coast
fact that you can call with anything, and he would never like hang up on you. He would never. It doesn't matter what you said to him. Like you could call and it'd be like, "And you are on with Art Bell. Go ahead." And somebody's like, I'm a time traveling werewolf that's also a Terminator," and then he's like, "Hmm." And then he goes, he doesn't say, "Well, you're crazy." He goes, "Hmm, tell me more." You know, and, then,
yeah.
and that was and that was his reaction. But anyway, so there was an episode where it was an EVP episode, and this guy played it. And first, you hear the splashing of water. It's like, have you ever heard that EVP? There,
Mm-mm.
you got to now. You guys got to look that up. I think it's like Art Bell
Mm-hmm.
EVP. So it was like the splashing of water, like sloshing, like you hear the splashing, and then you hear like a little boy say, "Help me, help me," and then you hear like another voice, which is like a deeper voice, and I think it says something like "Shut up," and then splashing, like a lot of splashing, and then the splashing stops. So, and this was in an abandoned factory. I mean, it was a factory that they said hasn't had water going to it. There was no water present. The water hasn't gone to this building in like 30 years. So there was no
Was there a
presence of
well in there?
no. It was
Wow.
a factory in the city, you know, and he was talking about how this was like something in the morning. There was no kids present. No kids are allowed to go on their investigations. And it was in a particular room, which I guess at some point had a swimming pool, like many years later. Many years earlier, I mean. Like, it had a swimming pool, but obviously it became a
Oh,
factory, so now it's just a regular factory. But there was a pool there, they said in the blueprints. And they believe that they captured a young boy getting murdered, like getting drowned. And it was like a very dark recording.
either getting drowned or drowning. I don't know.
Okay, anyways, so so I don't like when somebody's telling me like, okay, this EVP it's saying the dog is in the basket, and then you hear it's like blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, I hear it, you know. So, but with this EVP of this child, it was very clear. It was like hard to deny because you clearly hear a very distinct "help me," and then splashing of water, and then somebody I couldn't understand what he was saying. I'm pretty sure he said "shut up" or something like that. But yeah, it was
Ugh.
like an EVP of a child
That
getting murdered, and I'm
that
like, ooh,
is dark.
that
We've
is dark
gotten a
stuff.
lot of stuff. And so one of the things that we'll get called out about a lot is somebody will hear, oh, remember, disembodied voice is a voice that you can hear with no context, right? It's just a sound. So they'll hear growling in their home, either like a dog growl, I mean, a real heavy growl, and it terrifies them, right? And yeah, rightfully so. They're terrified of it. But you play 50 questions with a client when they call. And then one of the questions, if they tell us that, is, have you recently lost a dog? And it sounds silly, but Mark, he's our demonologist, and you've met him. And he particularly goes down these alleys with people.
Yeah,
And more than likely the person will say, well, yeah, we put our dog down a couple of months ago. And it's the growls, and if you hear growls, it does not necessarily mean something terrible. It could be, you know, that doggy is there to warn you of something, or they sense maybe another presence coming in and they're growling to say, hey, my house. And so it doesn't necessarily mean something dark, but
yeah. Or it could be there's strange people in his
yep.
house and they're walking all around the house, and I don't know them. You had an interesting story that you told once about
Oh, Earl.
you had lost a dog, and
Yep. He was one of my
what
bloodhounds.
was he a
I
bloodhound? Is
always
that what he
have
was?
bloodhounds. Yeah, Earl, I had to put him down very suddenly, and he was a big dog. Well, he was a big dog. They're heavy dogs, and
Bloodhounds
he was
yeah, they're
particularly
heavy
like my new
dogs.
bloodhound is not nearly as big. And I went. Earl was huge. He was about 140 pounds, big dog, and he had a way of leaning against you all the time. He'd come right up next to your thighs, and he'd kind of push, and it was a very comforting feeling. I loved it because he'd push and then I could reach down. I didn't even have to like lean over. He was so big, and just pet him. Well, we
Yeah.
put him to sleep, and I had gone to get the next bloodhound from the breeder, and we came back, and so little bloodhounds running around the yard, and then I feel the weight push against me, and I actually shift my body weight, and I reach down to pet him. I just instinctively, and there's nothing there. And he leaned against me on and off for a while before he never did again. I thought that was fascinating that he was there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. I have a dog. She's a big dog. She's a
Oh, I love Anatolians.
Anatolian Shepherd mixed with a Great Pyrenees,
What a great name.
and yeah, so she's a big girl. I mean, she's no
Oh,
Anatolian
yeah.
Shepherd
Yep.
and a
Great
Great Pyrenees.
cross. Yep.
Yeah, and she's humongous, and she does that. She'll like walk up to you and she'll crush you. She's like leans on you, and you're like, oh, she still thinks she's a
Yeah.
lap dog, you know, and it's like, oh, too bad you're too big, or I'll pick you up and throw you. Just joking, but but yeah, but when you say that about the dog leaning on you, like that makes sense. Like I know what that sensation is like, and yeah, you do instinctually feel the
Yep.
pushing on you, and then you just reach down and you
So it's
pet them,
not
you know.
that uncommon to capture
So when you said that, I'm like,
animals' EVPs. If particularly in a home where like I have a farm, so I got 47 animals here. It's not that unusual if one passes that you're still going to capture them, that voice, that sound, that bark, that particular cat cry. I mean, all animals are distinct, just like our voices are distinct.
yeah, they'll have their yeah, especially mine. I already said this. I sound like an air conditioner. You know that when people listen to it, they're like, "Man, you need to clean up that filter. That sounds horrible." Like if I have that droning voice that like if I ever die, well, yeah, well,
So
I'm planning on
far.
living forever. So far, I'm doing pretty good. So like, so so if I die and you capture my voice on EVP, their SOS, and then you're like, I think I captured the voice of Decon. You play it, and it's just droning. You better be careful because you might fall asleep behind the
It's kind
wheel.
of interesting because one of the questions that was asked of us years ago was, are all your EVPs in English? And no, they're not. Most are, probably because, well, I don't know, honestly. Why would they be all in English? I think most of the homes and businesses we go to have been English speaking, right? But we have gotten EVPs in other languages, some of which we can't decipher. We don't know. We just simply don't. We've never heard the dialect, the English, the language, whatever. And also, um, but I don't know if it, like, is the spirit always gonna? So I speak English. So when I die, if you capture me, I assume that I'm always in English if I was to be captured as an EVP. But does with death come infinite knowledge? So can we then, right? So then can we speak any language
Ooh,
we want? So if I am being recorded in France, would I speak French? You know, like I don't know. Like, we don't know, right? Can we?
I like to think that that if I die in France, and then people will be like, "Oh, that's awful saint," and then they're playing like my EVP, it's like they're not called French fries; they're called freedom fries. You bunch of
Yeah, you
communists.
would say that, Nico. But what I'm saying is, like,
And he'll be like, "What?"
you watch these shows and almost all the EVPs are in English, but then again, I'm not watching Spanish ghost hunter shows because I can't speak that language, so I'm not watching those. I don't know if they're on somewhere, but I'm not
Yeah.
watching them. So I don't know if when if you do end up with some kind of infinite knowledge, and I'm actually capturing somebody who did speak Spanish, but his EVP is in English because that's what I can understand. I don't know.
You know what's crazy is I say that a lot in one of my episodes, but you know what's crazy is they were doing an investigation. What channel is that? But they were doing an investigation somewhere in the south, and they captured Japanese on the EVP recorder, and they're like, I think that what language is that, you know? And it's like, I think that's Japanese, and they couldn't figure it out. They're like, why would there be Japanese, you know? And then they're like, well, maybe it wasn't an EVP until you start remembering that
Yeah,
they put the
exactly. That's what
Japanese
I was
people in
kind of thinking
internment
of.
camps in the United States during
Well,
World War
so
II.
we had German prisoners of war in East
So
Idaho, particularly in Idaho Falls. They brought some of the prisoners of war to Idaho Falls to work the farms because all of the farm hands were in the war. So those things
yeah,
happened in wartime. So if you captured an EVP in Idaho Falls of a German person, then it could be that, you know, a lot of them stayed. They were given the option after the war ended to go home, and a lot of them chose America. They're like, oh, we want to stay here. Yeah, they wanted to stay
yeah,
here.
yeah.
So
It's America. You kidding me?
I mean, just
Yeah,
because we're in America doesn't mean how many languages are spoken here? Thousands? I don't know, you know? And then
yeah.
go ahead.
And I wonder how
Well,
much. Oh, go ahead. So I want. Do you know there's those EVPs where people are like, "What's it saying?" And it's like whatever, and you hear like nothing but muttering. I wonder how much of that is an ancient
I
language
don't
that we don't
know.
know.
It's really
You know what I
interesting.
mean?
And I've actually gotten EVPs that almost sounded like Gregorian chant. Like you Yep.
Yes, that's what I was gonna
We've
say.
listened and listened and listened, and it's like, this
There's a
has
lot
got
of
a
those.
melodic, rhythmic sound to it. What is this? Can't figure it out.
There was an EVP in an old movie theater, and that somebody was playing, and it said you can't understand like what it's saying, but it goes, oh say,
I was like
you
the
know, and then they're
Star
like,
Spangled
what is
Banner to
that?
me.
And I'm like, I think that's a chant. Yeah, it was
Yeah, right?
it was a General Patton. Yeah,
Yeah.
them Nazis. um, but yeah, it was like an oh, you know, and I was like, is that a chant? What is that? And they couldn't figure it out. I'm like, is it saying old sim? And I'm thinking, what if it's saying oh sin? What if
Yeah, I
it's
don't know.
like a religious chant in a place? You don't know. And man,
Well,
maybe I should do
yeah,
some
you know,
EVPs
it's
on this old
interesting.
farmhouse.
You can use your phone recorder. I use my phone a lot. So I just have the record app on the phone, and I set that down and let it play, let it go. You know, um, it's not just for spying on your neighbor. It's, you know, use it to record EVPs. You'll be really interested in what you get. And what you'll find is we go through these whole question answer routines on our investigations of, you know, did you used to live here? Is your name Bill? Is your, you know, whatever. And when we capture the most EVPs is when we take a break and we're just sitting around shooting the breeze. Hey, what'd you guys do last Saturday? We start talking. That's when we capture the most EVPs. That conversational mode, all of a sudden, boom, they're there. It's like they're going, oh my God, this is, you know, somebody's having a conversation. We can join in. So that makes me suspect that that's happening all the time. We're just not aware of it. When our friends are over, When we're having these
Oh,
conversations, there's somebody going off in the background. We can't hear it. It's not in the frequency we can hear. So,
yeah, and that's a what I'm thinking about my house is it's an old farmhouse, so I hope I have racist ghosts. You know how cool that would be to hear them like also not be able to identify what Hispanic I am and they just like say the most random like you can hear the ghost going, "A Puerto Rican in my house."
rattle the chains.
Oh, yeah, just rattling the old chains. He's a very stereotypical, ghost. But 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 also another thing is that we've talked about this in the past too. So there was a group that was in one of those old like ghost towns in Utah, and there was a
Oh
place
yeah.
that used to be a blacksmith shop, and and then they were recording and they got nothing. They were recording and they got nothing, and then they got a more seasoned investigator to come in. And then he was like, "This was an old blacksmith shop." And he goes, "Yeah." And then he pulls out a knife and he lays it on this little table thing. And then immediately you start hearing responses. Like I think it says something like, "Where get that?" or "How'd you get that?" Or
Right.
just something like that because it was probably a
Right.
modern knife. And if you're a blacksmith and you make knives, you make all kinds of stuff. And if you bring a modern knife, like of course it's gonna be like, "Whoa, I
Right.
know what that is, but how did you get that? Where did you get that?" So, and he was talking about like in some of these places you do need trigger
Yes.
objects to get
Trigger objects
EVPs.
are super duper helpful on investigations where you're doing something that um, blacksmith shop, something that has a time era associated with it, an era of um, manufacturing or Victorian era or something like that, where you have an era that the building or the people that used to be in the building are associated with. So bringing those trigger objects are super helpful. We have teddy bears and toys and cars like Hot Wheels and stuff that we bring when we think there might be a kid involved because kids want to play. So, and you may not see the toy move, but you'll hear the EVP associated with play. You'll hear a giggle. You'll hear something like that. So trigger objects are super helpful for looking for EVPs. Definitely.
So, man, there's so many questions. See, the thing with EVPs is that you have your different classes, correct? Like there's the class A, B, and C. Is
I
that
don't
how much,
know. I
or is there a
use
D?
Class A, Class B. Class A, they're super concise, super clear. Everybody who listens to it's going to hear it. They're going to hear exactly what is said. The Class B are a little harder to decipher. If there's more classes, I don't know. I don't use them. But for example,
So it's
well,
either
for
intelligible
example,
or not.
we got an EVP, was a disembodied voice actually that was also an EVP because we got it on multiple recorders, but it was disembodied because we all heard it happen at the same time. And we were at the Stricker Ranch, which is in Hanson, Idaho, and which is by Twin Falls. It's an old stagecoach stop. It was a boarding house. It had a general store, a livery stable. I mean, it was just a kind of a happening place back then. And we had the historian with us of the ranch because it's now a state park, I think, a state historic area. So she was telling us that of the story of Clyde Stricker, who was kind of the black sheep of the family, and he he didn't want to play by the rules, and he ran away from home because he wanted to be a cowboy. And just, I mean, this 1800s, so by default you're kind of a cowboy, but so he kind of took off. Well, he did come
Yeah.
back home, and his room upstairs we were all sitting in, and his saddle was in there, like his personal saddle, and a lot of his own personal effects are still in the house in that room. And we were playing the whole flashlight game, kind of like, turn the flashlight off if the answer is no, kind of thing, right? And I have a hard time with the flashlight thing. I mean, it can work, and it was working that night, definitely. And we didn't want to stop to change the batteries, but I could tell that the flashlight was getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And then all of a sudden I knew the batteries were going to go dead. And we were having such a good response session with him. I didn't want to stop. And then boom, the flashlight turns off. And we hear the disembodied voice, and we get it on multiple recorders upstairs. Like, and I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's something like, "Why is the light in Clyde's room off?" And we were all like, "Did you hear that?" I mean, it was like shocking. It was so loud. And I'm rushing to change the batteries. We were like, wow. And we caught it on every recorder up there. We had like 3 or 4 recorders on the top floor of the house. And even the person sitting downstairs watching monitors that we had all around the property, cameras, he said, we're like, "Did you hear that?" He goes, "Yeah, I thought it was you." We're like, "No, man." And you can see our reaction on film because it was crazy. So
Yeah, good thing that person's name wasn't Clifford. You guys would have gotten beaten to death with a
yeah, it was
flashlight.
pretty fascinating. That was a good investigation. Check it out on our Pocatello Paranormal page, because YouTube page or wherever, Facebook. It's a good investigation. We had a lot of EVPs. Some of the EVPs sounded like, when we played it back, and this was disembodied noise. It sounded like the downstairs dining room was being absolutely trashed. It sounded like chairs were being thrown. You name it. It sounded like demolition. We all went running down there to figure out what's going on. Nothing was out of place.
Huh.
Like a
What do you
bar
think that
fight?
was?
I don't
You
know.
think that was one of those
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You think it's like residual energy
Something
of a
went down
violent
in that
encounter of
dining
some
room,
kind?
definitely. Yeah.
Man, it was something. So, man, see, that's the thing, is that there's so much to talk about with EVPs that I could go on for hours. Okay, so there was a so there's EVPs that you only capture through the recorder, but sometimes, like you just said, you can hear it out loud. There was a group that was investigating old tunnels, and I think they were afraid that they were gonna they put markers so they could kind of figure out which tunnel to go to. And one of the guys says, "All right, well, we need to find the marker." He says, "Where's the marker?" And then all of a sudden you hear a woman's voice, and it sounds like she's yelling from like within the tunnel. She says, "Why don't you try to find me?" And the guys are like, "Holy shit, did you hear that?" And then and I listen to that, and I'm like, man, how sad would that be if somebody got lost in that tunnel and then died, and then they're so frustrated, just waiting to be rescued or whatever, and you find some guys looking for something, and of course the thing's gonna say, "Why don't you try to find me?" It's kind of heartbreaking sometimes, like those EVPs
Yeah,
that you
they
hear
are.
sometimes. Sometimes it's pretty sad,
Yeah.
especially when
But
it's
remember the
children.
location too. Tunnels are deceptive with the way that sound can travel. I've worked in mining and been in a lot of underground mines, and it's amazing how somebody's voice at the entrance of a mine can carry a quarter mile back, and it sounds like it's right in your ear.
All the
So I would say, if you're doing something
Whoa.
like that and you're in tunnels, first off, make sure that they are safe. Secondly, um, the walkie-talkie system, as long as there's no gas in the tunnel, works really, really well to make sure that you always have somebody stationed at the entrance to make sure that you don't have voice carryover from something going on outside.
Yeah, and see, that's a great tip too for all you people out there with walkie. Sometimes, even like with something like those little
Yeah.
kid walkie talkies, you'll pick up somebody's, you know, breaker 19, breaker 19. You know, it's a truck driver. Like it's probably just
That's why I
just
have
a
a
lot
really
of
hard
things. Sound
time with
contamination
spirit
is what it
boxes
is.
and things like that because they're
Um,
picking up just random voices and it's supposed to mean something. It's noise.
explain what a spirit box is
Allegedly
for those of,
you
that don't know.
communicate, you say like, what is your name? And then you hear all the static and then the name Jim shows up. And then then you hear static and you ask another question and then it supposedly will answer you, right? But it's supposed to be working on like FM radio waves and pulling the right information to you at the right second. But first off, they just give me a migraine. I don't like them. Secondly, I think it's a lot of nothing,
Yeah,
honestly. I mean, sometimes you'll get,
you turn them on. You turn them on,
yeah,
and they're like,
the noise. But sometimes, and I'm not a person that believes in coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I think things, line out the way they're supposed to. But sometimes you're going like, okay, maybe, for a fact the old homeowner that died, her name was Naomi. And then all of a sudden the word Naomi comes through. Those are weird. I grant you that. That's weird. But I just have a really hard time with that piece of equipment. I can't put a lot of stock in it. They do.
a lot of people do. A lot of people say like, well, don't worry, I got my spirit. I'm just afraid like if somebody picks up like one of my transmissions and I'm just talking to them, they're like, I hear nothing but droning, and it's just me being like, hey guys, I hope you guys are having a good time. You know, I'm over here trying to communicate with you guys. There's nothing but droning. You know, maybe it's broken. Are you okay? I'm so stupid. Why do you people listen to me? But one final thing on my end. So there was a, you know, when the way that you guys do it, where like no one knows what's going on, like it's just so they brought in these people to ask questions, and then they were saying like, "How are you?" You know, whatever it was they were saying,
Mhm.
and then you hear like the voice of a child, and a child saying, "I'm really cold," you know, "It's really cold," or complains about being cold. And then the people are like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. I guess it's cold, you know." And then they were once the whole investigation was over, they did research on the location. Apparently, that was a place
Mm,
where the family froze to death on a
yikes.
winter with no heat. So then when you hear that
Yeah.
it's cold or
Well,
I'm
it's heart.
cold, it's like, ooh,
It is. It's heart wrenching, and
that is heart wrenching.
it's also validation of the story, right? I mean, why else would that EVP be there? If you can validate what's being told to you some way through like your local historian or talking to the neighborhood, we caught EVPs of a little girl saying she had been burned to death. And yeah, bad. It was real bad. And we were like,
Oof.
oh, I mean, it was bad. And uh we didn't have any knowledge of any of this in the beginning of the investigation. It wasn't until a few weeks after the investigation when we told the homeowner, look, we got this EVP and we don't know what this means. And they started asking people in the neighborhood, and come to find out the father got in a wreck with his family. He was drunk driving, and I guess he rolled the car several times in it, and it exploded. Yeah. And so,
Caught on
I mean, she
fire.
was in
Oh
the
man.
house. The little girl was back at home, but she kept saying that she'd been burned, and we, that was like, holy crud. I mean, we didn't know this, and neither did the homeowners at the time until they started talking with her. Like, did you know the family that? And it was an elderly person who said, "Oh yeah, I remember when this house was built and this couple lived in here, and this is what happened." And they're like, "Oh my god, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that can happen," and it just kind of rocks you a little bit. You're like, God, do I really want to keep doing this? Because it can take the wind out of your sails for a while when you have those events.
There was a short story or a poem. I don't remember who the author was, but it kind of reminds me. So okay, so it's called. You guys can look it up. It's called "A
No.
Resident of Carcosa." Have you ever heard of that short story? So a man. It starts off with a man leaving his house because he was sick, and he's wandering around, and then an animal like chases him and it leaps after him, and then it just disappears before it hits him. And then he finds another person, and he's trying to talk to him, like, "Excuse me, sir," and yeah, and it was a British author, so I like to think that he was going, "Excuse me, sir, I am quite ill. Can you help me?" And
What?
then
I can't hear
you
you
know,
over the drone. What? Oh, sorry.
and so
No.
all right, so anyway, so then this person has a spear and it like
Wow.
runs at him and then vanishes, and he's super confused, and he's like, "What?" And so then he decides to walk back home, and when he's walking back home, he sees a torn down sign with vines crawling all over the giant stone, and it said, "This is the town of Carcosa." So I guess he's been dead for decades, and what he was doing is he was wandering around in a confusion. So I wonder if that's what it's like a lot of the times when these people
Yeah,
just
I
die
would imagine
suddenly
that
and they're just
if it's
confused.
not a death
You know?
that is expected and it's violent and fast, and I would imagine there's a period of confusion around that. You know?
So a lot of these, like especially like children EVPs, like
No,
just the
the
confusion and
children
the
EVPs
fear
that we get are
that they
not
have.
afraid. They're a lot of times they're alone, and they're
What,
just
what,
like, and they'll say that they want their family, or but they're not afraid. Most of the kids that we get are giggling and laughing, believe it or not.
those are sick kids. Yeah,
Well,
those are
and
sick
it's
kids.
funny too
Those
because
kids
a
are
lot
probably
of the
named
children
Clifford.
entities that we run into will go to a house with children.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So there was an EVP, and before we close the show, there was and I said I was done, but like I said, we could talk about this topic for hours. So there was these people go and investigate this place. It's like abandoned clinic or something like that, or a hospital, and then they're going home, and then they're kind of like recording their experiences, like, "Oh, this was so much fun, whatever." And then there's a child's voice that was the same voice that they captured earlier, and he was saying something
Yeah,
like, "I can't wait to play with your
yeah,
kids," because one of the people there had
yeah.
children, and this thing like had gotten in a car with him. So so what I was gonna say is, what do you do to make sure that you bring
We
nothing
all
home with
have a
you?
different ritual for protection that we do prior to an investigation. Um, we whatever our protection is, whether you're wearing something or you're asking whatever the universe or God or whatever it is to protect you. We all have our different rituals. I personally just I'm mean. And so I'm like, nothing's coming home, and that's it. I just walk out the door going, I'm gonna come in here back home empty. I mean, I just don't let it happen.
It'd be funny if one of those things like, "What are you doing?" "I'm gonna go home with her," and
Yeah,
then he sees you
pretty
talking.
much.
He's like, "Yeah, never
Like,
mind."
she's mean. So
It's like, nah, never mind. Anyways, man, this was such a fun episode to record. I mean, I love this topic. It's so interesting because, like I'm kind of a skeptic, but man, a lot of those things are kind of hard for you to argue against because there's like so many out there, and you're like, okay, like what is going on here? People are probably sleepy. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's so fun. Like I can just sit there and just listen to like EVPs and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff
I
for
enjoy it.
hours.
They're a lot of work to put together in a video, I can tell you what, especially with something like the one I'm working on right now for the coffee place. It's wow. Did we get a lot of EVPs on that? It's bananas how many we got. Hundreds.
Was it like a lot of millennials that died from like a cloudy day, and then you're listening to the AVPs? He's like, "I eat nothing but organic kale because it's
Yeah,
like
we got
really good for
everything in
you."
there. We got everything in
And
there.
you're like,
So
"Man,
it'll
I
be an
wish I was
interesting
dead."
one to finally put together and I'm working on it right now, but it's yeah, like I said, you can go to a place where you don't feel like you're getting a whole lot of activity, and you can get, 10 to 100 EVPs. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so crazy. If I were to listen to hipsters on an EVP or something, I'd be like, okay, guys, let's cross the beams. Anyway, all right, let's close out the show on that note. Um, I was I am one of your hosts, Decon, and I was here with a very,
SOS?
very mysterious. And remember, guys, to always look both ways if you're in a hipster cafe. Wait a minute, that's not how it goes. If
All
you find
right,
yourself
see ya.
on Nightmare Road.
All right, I'll download this and I'll get it cleaned up with that pause in the middle where we lost video, and I'll send it to you tomorrow. Okay.
All right, sounds good.